Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again from Film Fanatic headquarters. It is Thursday morning, March 12th, 10:57. So yeah, been doing covering all things Friday 13th. Uh, I should probably temporarily change my channel to the Friday 13th channel. I've been covering so much, but it's been great. I'm always trying to think of new ideas about videos for videos and content and all those kinds of things. So I started this series where I'm kind of doing a series of videos where I'm talking about every actor slash stuntman who has played Jason Voorhees in my favorite franchise of all time, and that is Friday the 13th. So it's a lot of fun. I've been kind of going. I started this video series. Obviously, I'm doing it in order. And today, which I'm actually the most excited about this one, is I'm going to be talking about the great and legendary Ted White, who played Jason Voorhees in Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter, which is easily, well, again, I love the franchise to death, and there's so many great movies. Standouts for me are really like films like Jason Goes to Hell, which I think is probably one of the most bonkers, if not the most bonkers movie in the series, and maybe the most original. Love that movie to death. I really love Jason X too. That's grown on me over the years. So many, so many great ones. But I don't know. I always come back to the final chapter being my favorite. Ted White plays Jason Voorhees, and it's pretty much my favorite as far as the sheer kind of intensity that he brought to the movie and to his role as Jason Voorhees. I think is kind of unparalleled. Really, really, really awesome. I just did a show yesterday. I just uploaded it on part three, Friday 13th Part 3 with Richard Broker, who is another actor who I really love. The one actor who I always thought was pretty good, but I will say has grown on me quite a bit over the years, and he's kind of, the face of, he is Jason Voorhees. Like he has reprised that role in more movies than any of the other actors, and that is Kane Hodder, of course. He was in about 4 films. He is kind of the face of Jason Voorhees. I always liked him, but I never put him on the pedestal as say people like, Ted White. But I do over the years that's really changed. I do really love his portrayal of Jason. So, but the other thing that's interesting, aside from Kane Hodder's role in this glorious world that is known as Friday 13th, every film has been a different actor. He was the only Kane Hodder was the only actor to reprise his role numerous times. The other thing that's pretty unique is that virtually every actor in the franchise all had they all came from the stuntman world. They all had a lot of the actors that have played Jason Voorhees have had to do, well, basically do all of their own stunt work in the films. So that's a big part of it as well. This Friday, tomorrow, I'm going to go see Friday 13th Part 4, the final chapter, on the big screen at Black Bear Cinema in Orono, which I'm super, super stoked. It's overall, hands down, my favorite movie in the franchise. I recently watched a show, Pizzawell, who is an awesome YouTube guy that I watch all the time. He's a next level Friday the 13th franchise fan. I mean, he's done multiple shows, has on the franchise, and has met all of the actors, has gone to all of the conventions where the whole cast has been over the years. He's met everyone. He's had some of the directors for some of the films on his channel, really great. He also did this really awesome show where he went to the location of where the actual real Camp Crystal Lake is, where you can actually go and visit and pay for these tours. And he did a really great show on that, which was a huge like celebration. So that's kind of where I am as far as my deep love for the franchise. But recently, Pizzoel was talking about. I watched a video where he was talking about the final chapter, and he was kind of more or less saying that that movie is like the quintessential slasher movie. It's like the perfect slasher movie, and it really is. It's got everything you want and you love. It's got great atmosphere. It's got lots of boobs and blood and gore, great kills. It's also, the return of the legendary Tom Savini to the franchise. He did the effects in the first film, and then he came back for the final chapter. So, the final chapter was a movie that I know as a kid, I definitely watched more than any of the other films. I've seen it so many times. I've seen all of the movies an ungodly amount of times in the franchise, including Freddy vs. Jason and also the 2009 release and Jason X. But Final Chapter is the movie that I always go back to. It's I've described it like, for me, it's like eating a big giant bowl of really creamy mac and cheese. It's like the ultimate comfort movie for me. I know that probably for some people sounds maybe a little fucked up, but I don't really care. So anyway, and then I uploaded a video today on Richard Broker, who played Jason in Part 3 3D, and somebody commented right away, shouldn't you have waited till tomorrow, which is actually Friday 13th, to upload the video? So I thought that was kind of funny. So I'm going to be doing, today's going to be about Ted White, and then I'm going to go right through the series again, where I'm going to cover every actor who has played Jason Voorhees. I know I probably have done a video on Ted White before, but this is a different, I like to think, maybe some people don't think so, but I like to think it's from a different angle because it's in the order and the succession of who's played this, legendary character. The most, Jason Voorhees, without a doubt, the most iconic character, the most well-known in the entire horror world. I think hands down. So yeah, let's get into it. I've seen some really great interviews. Ted White a few years ago passed away, but he lived till about 96 years old, and he's such a badass. Like for me, Ted White is like the definition of a badass. So I recently watched there's a lot of great interviews with Ted White over the years, and he started his career in Hollywood as a stuntman and also a double. So he was in, like, his resume or his discography of films that he's been in is like just staggering, unlike anyone else that I know of. Well, especially when it comes to the Friday the 13th franchise, as far as the actors and all of the many actors that have played Jason Voorhees. The list of films and the decades of, through all of the decades he has been involved in the movie industry, it's insane how many different genres he's been in. One of the things that really stands out for me about Ted White is, again, he started his career in Hollywood as a stuntman, and then he also doubled for a lot of major Hollywood stars, but primarily had been a stuntman for many films in Hollywood for quite a while before he became Jason Voorhees. And part of the thing with Jason Voorhees is, his stature, his presence, he's got to be this very imposing, intimidating kind of monstrous character. And I think Ted White he brought a certain level of physicality to the movie and to the character that, just really cranked up the intensity to new heights. He brought this level of intensity to where he was a kind of a faster, more of a kind of brutal predator kind of a character. Last year, I was watching some interviews, some older interviews, or I should say, just from a few years ago, because he passed away at 96 a few years ago, but just a legend, a legend. Not only for Friday the 13th, and again, he's easily my favorite my favorite actor who's ever played Jason Voorhees. But just the, you know, incredible career. I Derek Mears, who played Jason Voorhees, which was the last movie that came out in the franchise in 2009. In this one interview, he was citing like his influences, and he was talking about Richard Broker, but especially from Part Three. But he was especially talking about Ted White. You know, just that intense thing that he would bring to the big screen. Really, really menacing. Like as soon as he walks into the room as Jason, like he doesn't even necessarily have to do anything. He just is all, you know, just it's pure intimidation, just so imposing. So, and Ted and Derek Mears were citing, you know, those two actors, Richard Broker and especially Ted White, being like his biggest, you know, influence for what he did for the kind of the reboot for the film that came out in 2009, which is Derek Mears is absolutely fantastic. I'm gonna eventually get to do a video on his portrayal of Jason as well. But last year I was watching a really cool interview, and it's on YouTube, with Ted White, where he was at a horror convention. He, I think, you know, amongst fans of the franchise, I think he's a favorite too. I mean, Kane Hodder is also a big, big, big favorite simply because he's played Jason for, you know, for he played Jason for, you know, a long time in many movies, and he is great. But Ted White also had a really big fan base, or continues to have a huge fan base. And I was watching this really great interview, you know, spending spanning the decades of, you know, going to all of these conventions. And there was an interview that he gave at a convention that was not all that long ago, and it was really great. It was so interesting because Ted White really took a deep dive into talking about kind of his origins in Hollywood and just sharing all of these amazing stories with all these different directors that he's worked with. One of the stories that he talked about that I thought was was kind of the most interesting was when he worked with John Wayne on a bunch of John Ford films, all of these classic westerns, where he also he kind of did two different things working with John Wayne. And he worked with John Wayne directly, where he was his stunt double, and then he also did a lot of his stunts, and he got to know him pretty well. And he shared a lot of stories about his relationship with John Wayne, which I thought was like really interesting because John Wayne, you know, a legend, you know, and the classic John Ford films. I mean, those are just, you know, amazing, some of the best westerns. So yeah, just really fascinating, really interesting. Just if you're, you know, you don't even have to be a fan of horror to kind of appreciate. Just if you're a fan of cinema, American cinema, it's, you know, super. They were just such really cool stories. So some of the films, and these are just, there's going to be probably some that I'm going to be leaving out just because there's so many films that Ted White was involved in over the decades. But starting, obviously, Friday the 13th, the final chapter, which came out in '84. He was also acted as a stuntman in the Friday the 13th series that was in the late '80s, from '87 to 1990. He was also a stuntman in John Carpenter's The Starman, which is a great movie. Very, very different movie for John Carpenter. I often forget that that's a John Carpenter movie. I have that on I bought it, I think, last year or the year before on Blu-ray, but it's a great movie. Also, Quiet Cool in 1986, Return of the Scorcher, Demonoid in 81, that really great Michael Douglas film, Romancing the Stone in 84, which I believe he was a stuntman on that as well. Wanted Dead or Alive with Rutger Hauer from 87, an awesome Rutger Hauer film. Massive Rutger Hauer fan here. Smokey in 1966, which was a Western going way back. Going Ape in 1981. I mean, these are just a few. Also, Double Take in 2001, Against All Odds in 84, The Hidden in 1987, Silverado in 1985, Cutler's Way in 81, The Wildlife 1984. And, you know, at the end of the day, Ted White, I think it's safe to say that Ted White is most well known for playing Jason Voorhees. But, I mean, just reading off some of these movies, there's comedies, there's action movies, there's, I mean, just multiple genres and horror films. But he did, you know, he acted and was involved with as a stuntman and as a double in, you know, multiple genres. So just an incredible level of versatility as a as a as a stuntman, as an actor too, and as a stunt double. The Legend of the Lone Ranger in 81. Yeah, that would be one to check out again. Sands of Iwo Jima from 1949. This is crazy. He was also a stuntman and a double in the original Tron, classic sci-fi from 1982. He was also in one of the greatest westerns ever made. Some people say the greatest western ever made, Rio Bravo, from 1959. He was also in Major League 1989. He was also in Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze. Crazy. From 89. I mean, it's just nuts. The Alamo 1960. Conager in 1981. Hot Pursuit in 1987, The Hidden 2, 1983, A Killer in the Family, 1983, Oh God, Book 2 with George Burns, 1980, Downtown, 1990, These Thousand Hills, 1959, which was another Western. He did a lot of Westerns. Escape from Zaron in 1962, Master Ninja 2, Stranger in My Arms, 1959, which I believe was another Western. Born Reckless in 58. Black Oak Conspiracy, 1977, which looks really awesome. Some of these movies I have not seen. For Better or Worse, 1985. It's wild. I mean, a lot of these actors that have played Jason all had, you know, pretty extensive backgrounds and have had, you know, many, you know, ties or have worked in so many films. But when it comes to Ted White, it's unbelievable. Jarrett in 1973 and Power in 1980. Just amazing. There are a ton of interviews with Ted White. Again, he became a big celebrity from becoming after his role in Friday the 13th. I often think, even though I think comparing the franchises is kind of night and day because one is kind of a mess and is not consistent at all, and one is just really consistent and really fun and just kind of delivers the goods. But I often compare or refer to Friday 13th Part 4, the final chapter, as the Empire Strikes Back of the franchise. Like it's just it's got everything you want, you know, and the stakes are high. It's got great humor, great some of the best kills in the entire franchise. It's a return of the great Tom Savini to the franchise. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Ted White's imposing characterization of Jason Voorhees is the best. Truly frightening in this film. The atmosphere, I think, for Friday 13th Part 4 is the best as well. It just the way that film was shot, the rain sequences. I'm a big fan of when there are a lot of really cool horror scenes, or even if the entire story takes place in a forest, or during the snowy season time of year, or when there's a lot of rain. And Friday 13th Part 4 utilizes the wilderness like no other, and also the rain or rainy aspect, that kind of aesthetic. And I think it really is. It was. I think it truly is kind of like the quintessential slasher movie. I think it's got everything. All all the boxes are checked. It's got everything that you want and you need from a slasher movie. It's very satisfying that way. It was directed by Joseph Zito. Just so great. And there's a lot of stories where I believe where Ted White did not get along with Joseph Zito at all because of the shooting conditions. I believe they shot part 4 during like the late October, almost going into the winter months. And there's a lot of scenes, where they use the water, they're outside, and the kids, the actors that were in the film were put through some pretty rough shit in the shooting as far as the temperatures. Ted White talks a lot about in these interviews of where he really hated how some of these actors were treated, especially them being kids, by director Joseph Zito. He also talks a lot about his relationship with Corey Feldman. Of course, this movie, again, the iconic, one of the greatest figures in Hollywood and just in general. Crispin Glover is in this film, a legend. One of his first films that he was ever in, I think it came out, man, I could be wrong. If this was before or after Back to the Future, it might have been before. But one of the earliest, if not the first role for Crispin Glover, legend, legend. I love Crispin Glover. How can you not? Also, Corey Feldman, who plays Tommy Jarvis, who becomes a bigger character in the other films, the later films. And Ted White talks a lot about working with Corey Feldman. Corey Feldman was very young when he did this film, but he talks about how he literally wanted to kill Corey Feldman a few times because he said he was such just a really obnoxious asshole to everyone, and just spoiled little brat. Yeah, it's pretty funny when you hear. That's one of the things I've always loved about Ted White, and seeing lots of interviews with him. The first time I ever saw an interview with the great Ted White was in this documentary, the special features component, which is awesome, which was a big reason why I'm doing these new videos, this new series. I was inspired by this. And since then, I've seen lots of other interviews with Ted White because I just love him so much. And I just love he's so bold in his honesty, and he doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't kiss anyone's ass. He's just really direct and super honest. Just so great. So, yeah. Got to check out Ted White. Again, so many movies that I read off. I know I have probably left out a few or a handful because there's so many movies that he was involved in over the spanning decades. starting from the late 50s through just up until like maybe 10 years ago. Just wild. So, yeah, the greatest actor for my money who ever played Jason Voorhees. So, just stuff of legends. And when I go, so Friday, I'm going to go see the final chapter, which I'm super psyched. I will definitely do a review of my experience. I've never gotten to see the final chapter on the big screen, obviously. I grew up watching this movie on VHS over and over and over again. I didn't get to see it when I bought the Friday the 13th box set. There's probably about three or four versions of it now. There is a version of the Friday the 13th franchise, the complete series, where they include every movie, I believe. There's like a 4K release that came out fairly recently, and there's a Blu-ray version of it as well. I don't know. I think it might have been Shout Factory. There's been a few different boutique labels that have put it out. I don't think it's just Shout Factory. I can't remember which company put out the one that I have. But the newer editions that have been put out include every movie, I do believe, including Jason X, Jason Goes to Hell, as well as the 2009 reboot with Derek Mears. The one that I got, I've had the box set for probably about 4 years now, which I love and it's great, but it's a little bit lame because it doesn't include all of the movies. It doesn't include Jason Goes to Hell, and it doesn't include Jason X, and it definitely doesn't include the 2009 movie, which is kind of lame. But I own the 2009 version. I have that on Blu-ray. Jason X I have on DVD, a good quality version of that. And then Jason Goes to Hell, I have a really good version of it on DVD as well. The rest of the movies I have on Blu-ray. But I remember when I first bought the box set, I was so excited and eager to watch the final chapter on Blu-ray because I had never seen it. And I got into Blu-ray kind of after the fact. I waited a while. I didn't get it. I didn't get into the whole Blu-ray craze because Blu-ray, I remember when it came out, it was hitting pretty hard. And then it kind of hit this weird plateau. It didn't completely take over the market like I think people have predicted, but it's been a pretty steady thing, I think, ever since. 4K has been a big thing, and obviously that's probably the biggest development when it comes to physical media. But I remember being so excited to finally see the final chapter on Blu-ray. I remember seeing it. It was on as a kid, always watching it on VHS, and then seeing it on some of the late night cable shows that would show rated R movies and horror movies. And I do believe I did see it a handful of times, probably more than that. But I did
Halloween.
buy it. I should say I never bought it on DVD, but I did see it a bunch of times. I did rent it over the years when the DVD explosion came, which really was a bigger thing. It had a deeper impact. I remember getting and seeing and renting the final chapter on DVD, and it was like this whole new thing of, wow, okay, the quality is so much better, and all those kinds of things. But it wasn't until I got the box set, the Friday the 13th box set, the edition that I got, that came out quite a few years ago now, which I still love. And I don't know, I'm not going to get another box set. I'm going to just get, I want to get an upgrade for Jason X and Jason Goes to Hell. And also, I forgot Freddy vs. Jason I have on DVD. Those three movies, I definitely need to get an upgrade on Blu-ray at some point. But when I sat down and finally watched Friday 13th, the final chapter on Blu-ray in the box set, I'm just blown. I was just like, oh my god! It was a whole, and even at that point, I had seen seen that movie a billion times, and I just couldn't believe how incredible it looked and how beautiful it was, the production value, the transfer. I mean, it's just, yeah. So I'm sure going to see it in the theater will be even more incredible because when we saw part three, I was blown away by it. It was literally, again, a movie, and I've said this many times, but again, you take a movie that I've seen a billion times and then watching it in a higher quality, a higher resolution, and with a remastered soundtrack. It's a whole. It's like watching it for the first time, at least for me. So thanks again, Ted White rules. Have a great day. Peace.